everyone, this is Professor Benjamin and welcome to session 7 of this semester. And in this session we're going to cover industry. So as normal, the module is set up here. You'll have your description, your PowerPoint, a TED Talk video, some readings, then you'll have your industry form and quiz. So as always, industry form is due by Tuesday, response post due by Thursday, and then you have your quiz due by Sunday each week. Under the industry description, it'll tell you exactly what we're going to cover in this session, and then the readings in the OER textbook that we're going to cover. So there is a large amount of reading this in this section. So it's 6.1, the Industrial Revolution, 6.2, explaining the industrial landscape. Then we have 6.3, core, periphery, spatial relationships. Then we have the economics of geography, the geography of economics, changing roles of women in economic development, international trade and globalization, global interdependence, and then transforming economic landscapes. So besides the chapter reading, you'll have the PowerPoint, your form, and your quiz. Going back to the session again, you just have a couple of those additional articles to read as well as a TED Talk video. No assignment is due this week. You'll have a TED Talk on the refugees of boom and bust. And this deals, of course, with a lot of times people talk about the Rust Belt, which are areas of that boom in industry and then they bust in those industries. So the tech industry, Silicon Valley could be a good example of this as well, which exploded and then it kind of crashed on itself. This article here ties to one of the forum post questions because we actually talk about sweatshops and maquiladoras, which is an area of economic growth. Well, it's not really for economic growth, but for the countries that buy from those sweatshops, it's economic growth. So there's an article here. Megacities. I know we covered this last session, but this is another way that we can look at the growth poses epic challenges for these megacities. Emerging economics, arrested development. So this is a really good article. NAFTA, this is definitely a hot topic issue now. President Trump really pushed for revising NAFTA or actually doing away with NAFTA agreements. There are some economics of the NAFTA agreement that I do agree with the fact that it did hurt Mexico significantly because we flooded Mexico's market with cheap corn and we put a lot of individuals in Mexico out of work, which then, of course, in turn created some of our immigration issues. And so we did play a role in that. And I do think that every once in a while these agreements should be revisited. Do I think we should do away with these agreements? No, but I do think that some revisions need to take place. Industry forum and then the quiz. So I just want to briefly look at the PowerPoint. There's a lot that we cover this week. So this walkthrough video is not really going to get into super details. I'm kind of going to let you do the reading for itself, but it takes you through the Industrial Revolution, series of improvements in industrial technology that transformed the process of manufacturing goods. It began in England, and then, of course, England had their Industrial Revolution. The United States had their Industrial Revolution. China has had their Industrial Revolution or are going through it. And so there's a lot to do, a lot to learn from industrial revolutions. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, people made household tools and agricultural equipment in home-based manufacturing systems known as the cottage industry. And then mass production is really when the Industrial Revolution took place. This is a really cool little slide that talks about the causes of the Industrial Revolution, and so it's really important for you to read through this slide. Then we talk about the economics of geography, and this is the way to gain wealth. Economic conditions are connected to how countries gain national income, opportunities, and advantages. So there are two main ways that you can gain wealth as a country. Either you can go take someone else's wealth, and we call that piracy or pillage and plunder, or through a sustainable income models and value-added principles through primary and secondary economic activities, natural resources, agriculture, manufacturing. So you could do one or the other. The United States actually actually takes part in some of this still. We do go to a lot of third world countries and take advantage of their natural resources, and we pillage and plunder them, so we really don't pay what the true value of those are. So that's something that you want to take in mind, is while it looks like it's old school piracy, pillage and plunder, there are other ways to do this that doesn't seem like it's that, but it actually is. And then we're going to talk about primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary, and quinary sectors. And Mr. Sin, of course, I love Mr. Sin videos, and he has a really great video, on these different sectors of the economy, and it's important to look at these sectors. The other thing is really important to realize how during the COVID pandemic, a lot of these sectors were taken out of the economy, and you noticed how the U.S. economy faltered because some of these sectors were completely removed due to the fact that we were in lockdown states. And so it's really important for you to think about that. Think about how these sectors related to today and how they affected the economy as a whole in the United States if we were to remove one of these sectors from the economics of the United States. And then also there are models that, show you different types of economics growths. And there is one created by Walt Rostow, and this model was adopted from the demographic transition model, which we learned about during population. And what is the pattern for economic growth model? I want you to kind of think about what that is. And I know I have a video here, and I just can't seem to find my link to Mr. Sin's video, so I may post another video in the module by someone who explains it a little bit better on the patterns for economic growth. So take a look out for that video under the module, not within this PowerPoint. Here's a really good graphic of the geography of economics, and so it's important to look at how countries or states move from a rural to an urban economic model and what happens during this model. So this graph will show you the shift and how that shift happens, right? It'll show you the different stages. So in stage 1, a country's in rural, traditional, then it moves to stage 2, and you can see family size starts to decrease. As we move into a more industrialized or post-industrial, you'll see that family size decreases because you do not need a large family to work on your rural farm. And you can see that happening. And this ties us back to our population chapter that we read, and how right now in the United States, there's about 1.8 children per 2-person families, and that's a significant decrease. That leaves us in the negative population growth, and the reason for that is we've really moved away from farming and rural to more to a different type of economy in the United States. Then we actually talk about the geography of economics. Again, we're going to talk about the Human Development Index, which I think is really important, that a lot of times we only looked at countries and what their GDP was, and we didn't really look at how happy people were in those countries, and the Human Development Index actually looks at a little bit more rather than just looking at the economics of a country on how well that country's doing. So this Human Development Index, besides looking at the gross domestic product or GDP, it actually looks at the standard of living of the individuals in the country, the healthcare, income, employment of individuals. So it's a more rounded approach to looking at the health of a country rather than just looking at the economics of it. And then we kind of move, this is a really great little image of what the HDI looks like. Then we look at women and the changing role of women in economic development. It is statistically proven that when women are incorporated into the economy of a country, that country moves from a less developed country to a more developed country in a quicker fashion. Engaging women in the economy in a country is absolutely essential if that country would like to move into a more developed scenario. And so this talks about a lot of this, the gender equality index, etc. So I want you to read about that. And the changing role of women, improved conditions for women worldwide. What does that include? A lot of countries will never be able to meet this, and a lot of it has to do with cultural and religious practices, but hopefully countries will realize the economic benefit of having women in the workplace in order to gain things. So I just referenced a less developed country to a more developed country, and these next two slides give you a hint at what those two terms mean in terms of that. And then we move into international trade and globalization. We're going to talk about the comparative advantage, and this is whichever good has the lowest opportunity cost, whichever good the country or place sacrifices the least to produce. And a lot of countries, of course, engage in this, and the United States takes advantage of them to do this. And that's where we get sweatshops and other things. So this talks about why the U.S. does not manufacture products anymore. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that other countries will have a better comparative advantage. And so we don't produce products anymore, because as a result, U.S. continue to manufacture the product if they can get something out of it. If they can't, then we have other countries doing that for us. And then we talk about global interdependence, and this is everything is connected in a globalized economy. And don't forget, a lot of countries do have globalized economies now because we live in a globalized world. So this actually talks about international trade, and there are a lot of issues with international trade, and we'll talk more about this later in the semester when we talk about development. And then we cover NAFTA. So there's a lot of articles on NAFTA here, and what NAFTA is and what NAFTA has done. And then we talk a little bit more about the idea of sweatshops and globalization, etc. And then how we can transform economic landscapes. We cannot leave out of the conversation of the future of the economies of countries, the digital revolution. And so we need to talk about this. And if you haven't noticed, in this COVID pandemic, companies really have capitalized and looked at how the digital revolution has played a role. And we may not go back to the way that we used to practice workplaces, right? A lot of workplaces will forego the actual building, right? The brick and mortar. And they'll rather have individuals work from home because they can do that. And it'll just be really interesting how this digital revolution blurred the lines between physical, digital, and biological spheres, and how the COVID pandemic really pushed us more towards this digital revolution. So I hope you enjoy this chapter. There's a lot to cover in terms of industry, and I hope you enjoy reading and understanding a little bit more about global economies and the industry of the United States.